Shakespeare's Improvers by Charles Lamb. To the editor of The Spectator. Sir, partaking in your indignation at the sickly stuff interpolated by Tate in the genuine play of King Lear, I beg to lay before you certain kindred enormities that you may be less aware of, which that codeluder of Sternhold and Hopkins, 60 with his compeers, were suffered, nay, encouraged, by an English public of a century and a half ago, to perpetrate upon the dramas of Shakespeare. I speak from imperfect recollection of one of these new versions which I have seen, namely Coriolanus, by the same hand which touched up King Lear, in which he, the said Nahum, not deeming his author's catastrophe enough striking, makes PG 377 Aufidius, if my memory fail me not, violate the person of the wife, and mangle the body of the little son of his Roman rival. Shadwell, another improver, in his version of Timon of Athens, a copy of which, 167-78, is lying before me, omits the character of Flavius, the kind-hearted steward, that fine exception to the air of general perfidy in the play, which would else be too oppressive to reader or spectator, and substitutes for it a kind female, who is supposed to be attached to Timon to the last, thus making the moral of the piece to consist in showing, not the hollowness of friendships conciliated by a mere undistinguishing prodigality, but the superiority of woman's love to the friendships of men. Evandra, too, has a rival in the affections of the noble Athenian. So impossible did these blockheads imagine it to be, to interest the feelings of an audience without an intrigue, that the misanthrope Timon must whine, and the daughterly Cordelia must whimper their love affections, before they could hope to touch the gentle hearts in the boxes. Had one of these gentry taken in hand to improve the fine scriptural story of Joseph and his brethren, we should have had a love-passion introduced, to make the mere fraternal interest of the piece go down, an episode of the amours of Reuben or Issachar with the fair Mizraim of Egypt. Thus Evandra closes the eyes of Shadwell's dying Timon, who, it seems, has poisoned himself. And so, after some more drivel of the same stamp, the noble Timon dies. And was not this a dainty dish to set before an audience of the Duke's Theatre in the year 167-78? Yet Betterton then acted Timon and his wife Evandra. I now come to the London acting edition of Macbeth of the same date, 1678, played, if I remember, by the same PG 378 players at the same house, from which I made a few rough extracts when I visited the British Museum for the sake of selecting from the Garrick plays. As I can scarcely expect to be believed upon my own word as to what our ancestors at that time were willing to accept for Shakespeare, I refer the reader to that collection to verify my report. Who the improver was in this instance, we are left to guess, for the title page leaves us to conjecture. Possibly the players, each one separately, contributed his new reading, which was silently adopted. Flesh and blood could not at this time of day submit to a thorough perusal of the thing, but from a glance or two of casual inspection, I am enabled to lay before the reader a few flowers. In one of the lyric parts, Hecate is made to say, Hecate, the solemn president of classic enchantments, thence adopted into the romantic, the triform Hecate, wearing spectacles to assist old sight. No, for a number 5, as the opticians class them, is not said. One may as well fancy Cerberus in a brand new collar, or the dreaded name of Demogorgon in jack boots. Among the ingredients of the cauldron is enumerated not a tiger's, but what reader? We were about that time engaged in a war with Holland. Again, Macduff being about to journey across the heath, the blasted heath, answers his lady, who courteously demands of him, "Are you afoot?" From which we may infer that the Thane of Fife lived as a nobleman ought to do, and kept a carriage. Again, the same nobleman, on the morning after Duncan's murder, says, "Rising this morning early, I went to look out of my window. I could scarce see further than my breath." And indeed, the original author informs us that it had been a rough night, so that the improver does not wander far from his text. The exquisite familiarity of this prose patch was doubtlessly intended by the improver to break the tire PG 379 some monotony of Shakespeare's blank verse. In conclusion, Lady Macbeth is brought in repentant and counseling her husband to give up the crown for conscience' sake. Item, she sees a ghost, which is all the time invisible to him. Such was the Macbeth which Betterton acted, and a contemporary audience took on trust for Shakespeare's. CL